Hello, guys. Close your eyes and imagine we are traveling back in time to a quiet hillside where a great stone castle stands under the pale light of dawn. The world around is still and hushed. Night's last stars are fading, and a gentle mist clings to the cold ground. In the distance, a rooster crows faintly to greet the coming day. Within these high stone walls, the castle rests in a soft silence, as if it too is not yet fully awake. If you find comfort in these quiet journeys through the past, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach. This castle has stood here for many ages. Its towers and battlements rise against the dim sky, solemn and steady. The stones are worn smooth by the passing of years and countless hands that built and tended them. Long ago, perhaps in early 1100, a simpler wooden fort may have crowned this hill, a humble modern bailey with a timber palisade and thatched buildings. But over generations, wood gave way to stone. Lords rebuilt their strongholds piece by piece, raising mighty keeps of gray rock that could better withstand the winds of winter and the trials of war. Now this castle of stone stands firm, a guardian of the land and a home for those within. It carries memories of those early days. The scent of fresh-cut oak and earth from the old wooden fort still echoes in its story. But today, its thick walls promise greater safety and permanence. Imagine walking across the open field toward the castle. Your feet crunch softly on a narrow path still damp with dew. Ahead, you see the castle's moat, a broad band of dark water that reflects the first glimmers of dawn. A wooden drawbridge spans the moat, lowered for the morning. Beyond it looms the gatehouse, a sturdy structure of stone, with two square towers flanking a great arched gateway. The oak gates within are closed at night, bound with iron and studded with bolts, but at this hour they have been swung open to begin the day's comings and goings. Thin vertical openings flank the gateway, narrow arrow loops through which archers can shoot at attackers, while remaining largely protected behind the thick stone walls. Above the archway, a sharpened iron portcullis hangs poised. In the quiet, you can hear the faint creak of its chains in the breeze. At present, the portcullis is raised, but one can imagine how swiftly it would crash down with a rattling thud in times of danger to seal the castle shut. You step onto the drawbridge, the wood planks thumping dully underfoot. The water below is still and green-tinged, perhaps with a few lily pads near the edges. Crossing under the shadow of the gatehouse towers, you pass beneath the arch and into the protective embrace of the castle walls. Two guards stand just inside the entry, wrapped in cloaks against the chill of dawn. They nod silently as you enter, their eyes respectful and alert even in their weariness. Their breath makes small clouds in the cold air. One guard cradles a spear, the other rests a hand on the pommel of his sheathed sword. These men have kept watch through the long night, pacing the walls under the stars. In a few minutes, their comrades will come to relieve them so they can warm themselves and rest. For now, they remain at their posts, loyal and steady, with only the gentle light of a lantern hanging by the wall to illuminate their vigil. Now you find yourself in the castle's main courtyard, the inner ward, which is the heart of daily life within these walls. It is an open space, roughly oval in shape, its ground hardened by countless footsteps. Patches of straw have been scattered over muddy spots to keep boots clean. All around the yard rise the essential buildings of the castle, some freestanding, some built against the curtain wall. Dawn's light is strengthening, allowing you to see more of your surroundings. To one side stands the stable, a long wooden structure with a thatched or wood-shingled roof. Its wide doors are open, and inside you can hear the soft nickers and shuffles of horses, sensing that morning has come. A groom with a lantern moves about within, checking on the animals. Just beyond the stable, a small penned area holds a few plump pigs that are snuffling in the ground straw, perhaps hoping for an early meal. The faint smell of livestock mingles with the crisp air, not unpleasant, just earthy and alive. Scanning further, you notice a dovecote rising on a pole near the wall, a cylindrical structure riddled with little entry holes. Even at this hour, you can hear the muffled cooing of pigeons waking inside. These birds are carefully tended. Their eggs and young squabs will grace the Lord's table from time to time. In one corner of the yard, an old apple tree spreads its branches, surprisingly green within these fortifications. It marks the edge of a small garden patch where herbs and vegetables grow. You can make out stakes of peas or beans and the feathery tops of carrots in the dim light. A chief gardener tends this precious green space, and later in the day, the kitchen staff will come here to pluck fresh herbs for cooking. Not far from the center of the courtyard stands a stone well. It's capped with a wooden cover and equipped with a simple crank and chain for drawing water. The rim of the well is worn smooth, evidence of how often hands have leaned on it while hoisting up buckets of water. Water is life in a castle. This well reaches deep into the earth to tap a cold, clear spring, ensuring that even in siege or drought, the castle's inhabitants have something to drink. At this early hour, a young servant boy is already at the well, turning the creaking winch. You hear the clinking of the chain and then the splash as the bucket emerges. He braces himself and lifts the heavy bucket, careful not to spill too much. Some of this water will be carried to the kitchens for cooking and washing, some to the Lord's chambers for washing, and some perhaps to the brew house if ale is to be made today. The boy pours a bit into a clay jug and then hoists the rest, staggering slightly as he heads off toward the kitchen building. From the direction of the kitchens comes the first real bustle of the new day. The castle's kitchen is housed in a separate structure along the courtyard's edge, a prudent design to isolate cooking fires from the main buildings in case of accidental blaze. Already, a faint orange glow shines through the high, narrow kitchen windows, and a thin ribbon of smoke winds its way from a hole in the roof or a small chimney. Within, the cooks and their helpers, the scullions, have been awake since well before dawn. If you step quietly to peer through the half-open kitchen door, you would see a great hearth against one wall, flames crackling under an iron cauldron. The silhouettes of the cook and assistants move in that firelight, chopping and stirring. They are baking the morning bread in a domed oven built into the wall. The scent of yeast and browning crust already teases the air. One scullion tends a smaller fire to heat water for porridge. The kitchen bustles with quiet purpose, clay mixing bowls being scraped, the thud of a kneading hand on dough, the soft clink of pot lids. They know they must prepare not only the simple dawn meal for the servants, but begin early preparations for the larger dinner to be served later in the morning. In a corner of the courtyard, not far from the kitchen, two blacksmiths are beginning their day's labor at the smithy. The smithy is a low shed with a roof of turf, nestled against the inside of the curtain wall to shield it from rain. Even now in the pale dawn light, you can see the ruddy glow of their forge. One smith works the bellows with a steady, slow rhythm, feeding air to the charcoal fire, while the other positions a piece of iron on the anvil. The ringing of his hammer on metal is muted at first. Perhaps he is aware that many in the castle still slumber, so he starts gently, tapping to shape a horseshoe or rivet. Each spark that flies illuminates the blackened beams of the smithy for an instant. The air carries the sharp, smoky tang of hot iron. These smiths will spend much of the day repairing tools, shoeing horses, and crafting metalwork from nails to sword fittings. Their presence, even at dawn, underscores that a castle is not only a home and fortress, but also a busy workshop for many trades. Above, along the walkways atop the castle walls, The overnight watch is making his final rounds. A lone sentry, silhouetted against the lightening sky, paces along the battlements. He is cloaked and hooded, carrying a bow and a quiver of arrows slung on his back. All night he has kept vigil, eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of threat. Bandits, a roaming enemy, or simply a traveler in need. Now, as the eastern sky grows pale, he pauses and draws out a small horn. With practiced breath, he blows a mellow note that drifts over the cold air. This is the castle's wake-up call, a gentle trumpet to announce that dawn has arrived and the day has begun in earnest. The sound echoes off the stone walls and seeps into the buildings, stirring those within. Gradually, the castle awakens. In the dim pre-dawn gloom of the upper floors, servants begin to stir from their straw-filled mattresses. In a cramped dormitory above the great hall, a cluster of maidservants rub their eyes and straighten their simple woolen dresses, kept on through the night for warmth. On the floor below, in a nook near the gatehouse, a few off-duty guards who have been snatching some sleep on their mats sit up, rolling stiff shoulders and reaching for their boots and belts. The rhythm of life is restarting, quietly and dutifully. A kitchen maid, shawl wrapped tightly around her to ward off the chill, scurries across the courtyard toward the kitchens to join the cooks. She steps quickly, arms folded with hands tucked under her armpits for warmth, her breath visible in the cold. Over at the stables, 2 stable boys unlatch the half doors and slip inside to tend the horses. The animals snort and shuffle as the boys move from stall to stall, murmuring calming words. Grabbing rough brushes, the lads begin to curry the horses' coats, knocking off dust from the night. One boy hauls a bundle of hay and spreads it in the mangers. The rich smell of sweet dried grass mixes with the earthy scent of horses. Another boy checks the water buckets and then pats the broad neck of the Lord's favorite charger, a big brown warhorse with intelligent, patient eyes. The horse stamps a hoof and nickers softly, as if saying good morning. Within the great keep, the central stronghold of the castle, footsteps echo as a few key servants go about their early chores. The keep is a massive stone tower that houses the main living quarters, the great hall, the family's chambers, and perhaps some storerooms and guardrooms. A senior servant, the chamberlain, walks briskly down a corridor, a large ring of keys jingling at his waist. He is making his morning round, unlocking doors that need to be accessible, such as the pantry or the treasury, and checking that nothing is amiss from the night. He exchanges nods with the steward, who has also risen early. The steward carries a ledger under his arm and is already mentally reviewing the day's agenda, from overseeing meal provisions to handling the Lord's schedule. 2 maidservants in plain linen coifs emerge from the stairwell, carrying bundles of fresh rushes and fragrant herbs. Their task is to refresh the floor coverings of the great hall. As they walk, one can catch the scent trailing behind them, dried lavender, thyme, and maybe a bit of chamomile mixed in with the clean rushes they harvested from the riverbanks. Entering the silent great hall, they pause a moment in the vast space. The hush is profound. Dust motes float in the weak dawn light that filters through the high windows. The remnants of yesterday's activity lie in the shadows. Here a bench slightly askew, there a forgotten wooden cup on a side table. The hall was swept last night after supper, but some debris always lingers. The maids set about their work quietly. First, they open a small side door to let in a bit of the crisp morning air. Then, with straw brooms, they give a quick sweep to clear any bits of last night's rushes that have become soiled or scattered. They gather up a few chicken bones a dog might have dragged under a bench and toss them into a basket to be taken out. After that, they spread the fresh rushes across the floor, especially near the high table and along the central area where people walk most. They sprinkle the aromatic herbs among the rushes so that each footstep throughout the day will release a gentle, pleasant scent and somewhat mask the underlying smells of a crowded castle. As they go about their cleaning, other servants attend to less pleasant tasks, emptying the waste of the night. Tucked near the bedchambers is a narrow privy chamber, a guardrobe built into the thickness of the wall. Inside this tiny recess, a wooden seat with a hole opens to a chute that drops straight down through the masonry. Far below, the shaft empties out beyond the castle foundations, or into a cesspit or moat. At night, the lord and lady might use this private privy attached to their chambers, braving the draught of cold air that rises through the opening. Many others use simple chamber pots in their rooms to avoid wandering corridors in darkness. With dawn, maids discreetly collect these ceramic pots and carry them off. They empty the contents down the castle's midden or into the moat, rinsing the pots with a bit of water and perhaps scattering a handful of dried lavender or mint afterwards to mask the odor. It is a humble, necessary chore performed quickly and dutifully each morning so that the living quarters remain as clean and sweet-smelling as possible in an age without modern plumbing. Such tasks are a reminder that even within lofty walls, daily life in a castle could be earthy and practical. Now imagine pushing open the heavy wooden doors of the great hall and stepping inside after the maids have finished. The hall is still cool and dim, illuminated only by the growing gray daylight that sneaks in through narrow windows set high in the walls. These windows are slender lancets in the thick stone, some fitted with translucent horn or oiled linen in wooden frames to keep out drafts, others simply open to the air with shutters that can be closed at night. At this early hour the shutters have been opened, but the light is gentle and blue-tinged. You can make out your breath as a faint cloud as you enter, for the hall retains the night's cold. The focus of the hall is a large fire pit in the center, ringed by stones. Last night's fire has died down to ash and a few faintly glowing embers. A young servant is already there on his knees, coaxing it back to life. He adds a bundle of dry kindling and leans close, blowing steadily. After a few moments, a tongue of flame flickers up, and he carefully feeds more sticks until a small fire crackles. Then he begins adding logs from the nearby woodpile. Before long, the fire is properly rekindled, and new warmth and light spread out in waves. A column of smoke gathers under the high rafters before finding its way out through a louver, a kind of chimney turret atop the roof that acts as a vent. In older times, there might have been just a simple hole for the smoke, but this castle is built with a little more sophistication, perhaps a vented lantern structure above the fire to guide smoke away. Even so, a faint haze lingers in the upper reaches of the hall, and the fragrance of wood smoke mingles with the scents of herbs on the floor. As the firelight grows, it reveals more of the hall's interior. This expansive room is the social and administrative core of castle life. Along the long walls hang tapestries that depict hunting scenes and legendary battles, their colors dim in the low light, but hints of verdant forests and knights on horseback can be discerned. These tapestries do more than please the eye. They trap some of the chill that seeps through the stone and reduce echoes in this grand space. Between the tapestries, high on the walls, hang banners bearing the Lord's coat of arms, and perhaps arms of allied noble families, deep reds, blues, and golds, now muted in dawn's palette. Near the fire, there are iron brackets holding unlit torches and a couple of niches with simple clay lamps that will be used when evening comes again. At one end of the hall, opposite the doors, is the dais, a raised platform a step above the rest of the floor. On this dais stands the high table where the lord and lady dine and preside. It's a heavy oak table, polished and darkened by age, with intricately carved legs in the shape of lions' paws. Behind it are high-backed chairs, cushions set in the seats, and above on the wall, the Lord's banner hangs proudly. The table is currently bare, except for a folded fine linen tablecloth and a pair of ornamental candlesticks ready for later. Lining the sides of the hall are trestle tables and benches, currently pushed back against the walls or stacked. These will be pulled out and assembled for meals and gatherings. Just now, 2 young boys, pages, are in the hall, quietly arranging things under the watchful eye of the steward's assistant. These pages are of noble birth, sent to serve and learn in the household from about the age of 7. Perhaps one is the son of a neighboring squire or a lesser baron, placed here to be taught courtly manners and skills. They scamper lightly as they work, mindful to be quiet. One is laying out a few polished metal goblets and pitchers of watered wine on the sideboard for the Lord's use later. The other is sweeping the last of the dust from the corner near the musicians' gallery, a small balcony above one side of the hall, where minstrels sometimes play. You catch a snippet of their whispered conversation, the older instructing the younger not to forget to place the salt cellar on the high table before they notice your presence and quickly fall silent, shy, and respectful. From a door on the side of the hall emerges the castle's chaplain, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and ink-stained fingertips. He carries a small lantern and is headed toward the chapel to prepare for morning mass. The castle's chapel is usually a separate chamber within the keep, or a nearby building off the courtyard. It is small but beautifully appointed with an altar, a few benches or prie-dieu for kneeling, and perhaps a colorful stained glass window if the Lord has been wealthy enough to afford one. The chaplain nods to you as he passes, offering a gentle smile before disappearing down the corridor. In a short while, the family and those of the household who are free will join him there for prayers. Now soft voices and footsteps are heard coming down the stairs that lead from the private chambers above. The Lord and Lady are awake and preparing to start their day. In the Lord's chamber, a room just upstairs from the great hall, or in a tower of the keep, the shutters have been opened to let in the morning light. The room is modestly furnished, but comfortable by the standards of the day. A large canopy bed with heavy curtains drawn back, a carved chest for valuables, perhaps a chair or two, and a prie-dieu, a small kneeling bench for prayer. Rich textiles provide color, a woven rug from the east laid by the bed, fur covers and embroidered cushions. The stone walls here are plastered and even painted with a pale lime wash, making the room a touch brighter than bare stone would be. A small fireplace is set into one wall, a later addition to the castle to provide more direct heat to living quarters. At the moment, the embers in that fireplace are low, but a servant has added a few sticks to revive it just enough to chase the worst of the chill away. The Lord sits on the edge of the bed in a long linen shirt, while his manservant, a valet, holds out his clothes for the day. Garments in this era are layered. First a soft linen undershirt and braize, a kind of short trousers, then woolen hose to cover the legs, and a tunic of fine cloth. The Lord's tunic this morning is a deep green dyed from oak galls, simple but well tailored, with modest embroidery at the cuffs, suitable for a day of routine rather than any grand event. As he dresses, he converses quietly with the valet about the weather and any news. The valet reports perhaps that it looks like fair skies, or that a messenger arrived late last night and is resting now, waiting to deliver a letter after Mass. In an adjacent room, the lady is also rising. Her ladies-in-waiting assist her in dressing. She steps from behind a wooden screen where she slept, for modesty and to block drafts, and allows a maid to help remove her night shift and draw on her day gown. Today she chooses a warm gown of burgundy wool, lined lightly with fur at the collar to keep her neck from the cold. Another lady-in-waiting gently combs out her long hair and then braids and coils it into a practical arrangement, covering it with a sheer linen veil and a circlet. Despite the early hour and informal setting, Her appearance is neat and dignified. She holds herself with the quiet grace expected of a noblewoman. While her ladies tend to her, the castle's mistress asks softly about the tasks planned for the day. Has the cook all she needs for dinner? Did the steward mention if the village hay cart is coming? One lady in waiting, who helps oversee household supplies, responds that indeed fresh hay for the stables is due today, and that the cook had requested more eggs which will be collected from the henwife later in the morning. A maidservant enters both chambers briefly with ewers of warm water for washing. Since there is no plumbing, water has been heated in the kitchen and carried up in covered pitchers. She pours it carefully into the basins on the washstands. The lord and lady each take a moment to wash their hands and faces, a brisk splash of lukewarm water that serves to refresh and cleanse the sleep away. Full baths are rare, perhaps only taken on occasion in a wooden tub with much effort to heat enough water, but daily ablutions of face and hands are customary among the upper classes. The lord wipes his face with a linen towel and pats it dry, feeling a bit more awake as the cool air tingles on his damp skin. The lady similarly dabs her face and then her hands. A light scent of rosewater or some floral essence lingers. The maid may have added a few drops to the water as a luxury. Before they depart their chambers, the lord and lady each spend a quiet moment in prayer, as is their habit. The lord stands by the small window, looking out at the emerging day over his lands, and mutters thanks for its arrival and a plea for wisdom and strength. The lady, at her bedside prayer stool, fingers her rosary beads briefly and whispers an Ave. Their faith is woven into the rhythm of their life, giving structure and comfort. Properly dressed and prepared, the noble couple makes their way to the chapel for Mass. The chapel is still dim when they arrive. A couple of beeswax candles on the altar provide a pure, steady light. The chaplain has laid out his vestments and lit a stick of incense, whose delicate smoke curls upward, carrying the sweet, resinous aroma of frankincense. The lord and lady step inside and genuflect, crossing themselves. The chapel's silence is profound, broken only by the shuffling of feet, as a few others enter behind them. The steward quietly slips in, as does the lady's chief handmaid and one of the older knights. Not everyone attends daily Mass. Many are busy or perhaps choose to pray on their own, but a respectable showing of the household is here. Mass is conducted in Latin, a language most of the congregation doesn't understand fully, but the ritual is comfortingly familiar. The chaplain's voice is low and melodic as he intones the sacred words. The congregation kneels on the wooden prie-dieu or benches at the appropriate moments. The small stained glass window, depicting a saint in red and blue glass, gradually comes alive as sunlight strengthens outside, casting colored patterns on the stone floor near the altar. The chaplain lifts the chalice, and the single bell in the chapel is rung by the acolyte, a clear ding that echoes, marking the consecration. In that moment, even those in the castle who did not attend might pause in their work, knowing by sound that the household's prayers are reaching their peak. After Mass, the Lord exchanges a quiet word with the chaplain, thanking him and possibly giving a small instruction, perhaps to say prayers for a sick villager or to prepare for a baptism of a newborn in the village soon. The chaplain nods and promises to handle it. The lady speaks briefly with the almoner, the chaplain's assistant, who oversees alms to the poor, about distributing leftover bread at the gate later. She wants to ensure an ailing beggar woman she saw yesterday is given extra care. With these gentle duties handled, the noble pair steps back out into the courtyard, blinking at the brightness of the morning. By now, the sun has cleared the horizon and spills golden light into the once gray courtyard. The mist has vanished, revealing the full, lively scene of a castle morning. A pair of castle dogs trot across the yard, tails wagging, sniffing at doorways in hopes of a treat from someone. Servants move about more briskly. The initial drowsiness has given way to the energy of daily routine. You notice a laundress carrying a basket of linens toward the stream gate, a trio of men-at-arms crossing from the barracks to the well to fill their water skins, and one of the older servant women throwing grain to the chickens pecking around near the kitchen door. The castle is fully awake now. In the great hall, the main meal of the morning, called dinner in these times, is being prepared, but it won't be served until mid-morning or closer to noon. However, those who labored since before dawn need some sustenance now. Thus, a simple breakfast is arranged mostly for the workers and children. In the corner of the hall, on a side table, the cook's apprentices have set out trenchers of yesterday's bread, softened in warm milk or ale, and a pot of thin barley porridge enriched with a little honey. There might also be some small beer, very low alcohol ale to drink, safer than water alone, and maybe a few wedges of mild cheese. The servants and guards not on duty gather briefly to break their fast. They stand or sit on benches in the hall, eating quickly and quietly, discussing the tasks ahead of them. A guard leans his spear against the wall and chews a bit of bread while talking with a comrade about an upcoming patrol on the roads. Two kitchen maids sip porridge from wooden bowls, already planning who will scrub the pots and who will fetch more firewood. The atmosphere is collegial. These small moments of sharing food knit the household together before everyone scatters to their responsibilities. As people finish their quick breakfast, they do not linger. Bowls are promptly collected and taken back to the kitchen. The castle's day has truly begun, and everyone knows their role. The steward sends one of his clerks to ring a handbell in the courtyard, a signal for certain workers to gather for instructions. A cluster of laborers, including a carpenter, a mason, and a couple of general hands, approach the steward near the well. He unfurls a parchment and speaks to them about needed repairs. The south tower steps are loose. We'll need to fix them today. John, fetch mortar from the stores. Peter, you'll help cut a new tread for the stair. They nod and set off to get tools, the carpenter heading to the workshop for wood, the mason to the storeroom for a sack of lime. The steward's voice is calm and firm, and the workers clearly respect him. In a quieter part of the courtyard, near the garden, the lady of the castle moves among her own small retinue, overseeing the domestic side of operations. She speaks with the cook, who has stepped out for a moment, wiping her hands on her apron. Together they review the plan for dinner, a pottage of beans and bacon, roasted game from yesterday's hunt, fresh bread, and perhaps a tart of plums from the store if the fruit has not spoiled. The cook assures her that all is in hand, but does mention they are running low on good salt. The lady makes a note to have more salt brought from the market next week, or to send a rider to the salt merchant in town. She also inquires if the brew of ale started a few days ago is ready. A castle of this size brews ale frequently, since it's the daily drink. The cook replies that a cask of new ale is indeed ready in the buttery, good for the servants in garrison, though a finer ale or wine remains in stock for the lord's table. Before returning inside, the lady steps into the castle's small walled garden for a moment of calm. Tucked beside an inner courtyard wall, this modest garden is one of her treasures. In raised beds in clay pots grow herbs and medicinal plants she has tended, sage, mint, and lavender, whose scents perfume the air. Simple flowers, marigolds, and roses add a touch of bright color against the gray stone backdrop. A narrow path of crushed gravel leads through the little greenery. The lady walks slowly along it, perhaps plucking a wilted leaf here and there, or simply enjoying the quiet. A sparrow flutters out of a rosemary bush, and she smiles at the brief flicker of life. In one corner stands a small shrine to the Virgin Mary, with a carved wooden statue, where the lady pauses to bow her head for a heartbeat of prayer. giving thanks for the peaceful day so far. This garden is her refuge, a gentle world within walls. After taking in the fresh scent of earth and leaves and feeling the sun on her face, she leaves the garden with renewed composure. Moving on with her entourage, the lady now visits a sunny upper chamber where the castle's spinning and weaving work is done. In a bright room under the eaves of one wing, several women are already busy at their tasks. One sits at a spinning wheel, her foot steadily pumping the pedal as flax fibers twist into thread between her skilled fingers. Another is working a loom, passing the shuttle back and forth to create a length of sturdy woolen cloth for servants' tunics. Younger girls, perhaps daughters of knights or ladies being fostered here, are practicing stitches on embroidery hoops. The lady's entrance is greeted with curtsies and smiles. She moves among them, asking one weaver about the progress on the new tapestry panel meant for the chapel altar, a piece depicting a vine and grape motif. The weaver shows her the section completed so far, richly colored in dyed wool threads. The lady nods in approval and gently touches the edge of the fabric, praising the evenness of the work. At another corner, she kneels slightly to see what the girls are embroidering. One is sewing a small scene of a rabbit in the grass onto a linen napkin, an exercise in fine needlework. The lady offers a kind suggestion on blending threads to make the rabbit's fur look more natural, and the girl beams at the attention. This is a peaceful, almost meditative environment. The soft thump of the loom, the whir of the spinning wheel, and the low chatter of women sharing gossip or songs as they work. The lady might take up a bit of embroidery herself, adding a few golden stitches to outline a leaf, as she converses quietly with the women. They might discuss the health of the baby one of the weavers has recently, or mention that the wool from last shearing was of good quality this year. These domestic crafts are not merely hobbies, they are essential to clothing and furnishing the castle. Under the lady's guidance, the castle produces much of its own textiles, linens for shirts and sheets, woolens for winter cloaks and blankets, and delicate embroidered pieces that showcase the household's refinement. After spending a little time encouraging and directing her ladies, the lady of the castle leaves them to their rhythmic work, satisfied that this realm of the household is running smoothly. Meanwhile, the lord of the castle has not been idle. After mass and a brief walk around the courtyard to see things firsthand, he has retired to his solar to address the administrative affairs of his domain. The solar is a private sitting room adjacent to the lord's bedchamber, comfortably furnished by the standards of the time, with a cushioned chair or two, a writing desk, and windows that actually have glass panes, small leaded ones that distort the light but keep out the drafts better than open holes. A fire crackles in a small fireplace here as well, casting a pleasant warmth. The steward stands by the desk, along with the constable of the castle, the officer in charge of defenses and the garrison. A few parchments lie open on the desk, weighed at the corners by simple pewter weights. The lord listens as the steward reads off a summary of the estate's accounts, rents collected from the peasants during the last market day, grain, chickens, a few silver pennies, and expenses like purchasing new roofing timber for the gatehouse, or paying the mason for repairing the chapel's stone altar. The steward's voice is respectful and monotone, comfortable in these details. The lord asks a question now and then, perhaps clarifying if the wheat stores are sufficient to last through winter, or if more should be bought. They discuss an upcoming collection, maybe a tax that needs to be sent to their own liege lord, or preparations for hosting a neighboring noble next month, which will require extra supplies. All of this is noted by a clerk who stands nearby with quill and ink, jotting in a ledger. Next, the constable reports on military matters. The garrison's men-at-arms have been drilling regularly. The quartermaster has fletched 24 new arrows to replace those used in last week's archery practice. One of the watchtower wooden platforms has rotted slightly and needs reinforcement. The carpenter is on it, as we know. He also mentions that rumors from travelers speak of bandits on the far road beyond the river. The Lord furrows his brow. Banditry can threaten his people and trade. He decides to dispatch a patrol of a few mounted soldiers later this week to sweep that area and deter the outlaws. The constable nods, already planning who will go on that patrol. They also speak of armaments. The armorer has nearly finished refurbishing a suit of plate armor, an heirloom piece, and it gleams now after much polishing and the replacement of some leather straps. The castle's small arsenal of weapons, swords, spears, crossbows, is in decent condition, though the constable suggests they could use a few more crossbow bolts. The Lord authorizes him to have the blacksmith forge the heads and the fletcher to assemble more bolts next week. These details ensure that, while the land is currently peaceful, the castle remains ready for any trouble. A scribe from the chapel, likely the chaplain's clerk, is then admitted to the solar, bearing a piece of parchment. It's a letter that needs the Lord's seal. The Lord reads it. Perhaps it's a reply to a distant cousin about a marriage arrangement, or instructions to a royal official about the tally of taxes. Satisfied, he drips wax from a candle onto the folded letter and impresses his seal, a unique coat of arms stamp, into it. The clerk bows and leaves to send it off with the courier. This done, the Lord's duties ease for the moment. He stands and stretches a bit, looking out of the solar's window at the bright courtyard below. The steward and constable depart to carry out his instructions. There is a satisfaction in knowing things are running smoothly, stores accounted for, defenses maintained, justice on track. He takes a moment to sip a cup of watered wine that a page brought, the liquid cool and sharp on his tongue, then decides to take a short walk around the ramparts to clear his head and personally inspect the walls. Grabbing a fur-lined cloak from a peg, for the wind atop the walls can be biting even on sunny days, the Lord heads out with one loyal squire, accompanying him at a respectful distance. He climbs the spiral steps of a turret and emerges on the wall walk. From here, he has a commanding view of his little realm. Inside the walls, the busy courtyard like a miniature village, and outside, rolling fields and woodlands that belong to his estate. The sky is a radiant blue now. On the wall, he greets the guards he encounters by name, "Good day, Hugh," and pats the shoulder of one man leaning on his spear. The guard, pleased by the recognition, stands a bit straighter. The Lord pauses at one point to gaze out beyond the moat. In a distant pasture, he sees villagers already at work, tiny figures guiding oxen to plow the soil. Closer, near the road, smoke rises from the chimney of the inn just outside the castle gates, and a couple of travelers on horseback make their way toward it. All seems well and ordinary, a reassuring sight. As the morning edges toward late morning, the focus in the castle shifts toward the main meal of the day. The kitchen fires, which have been steadily cooking pottage and baking bread, are now in full blaze, finishing roasted meats and boiling vegetables. The enticing aroma of food intensifies and drifts from the kitchen on the breeze, wafting through the courtyard and reaching even the guards on the walls. It is nearly time for dinner. In the great hall, the earlier breakfast remnants have been cleared, and the tables are being set. Several servants, assisted by the diligent pages, arrange the trestle tables in neat rows, perpendicular to the high table on the dais. They drape plain linen cloths over them. These linens are not as fine as the high table's cloth, but clean and serviceable, hiding the rough wood. They place out wooden bowls and spoons for each expected diner, and knives, for most carry their own personal eating knife, but a few spares are set out. Pewter jugs of ale and a few wineskins are placed strategically so drink can be poured. At the high table, the finest setting is laid, a snow-white cloth, pewter plates polished to a shine, the Lord's silver drinking cup, and the lady's ornate goblet, along with a decorative salt cellar shaped like a small tower, a status symbol placed before them. Salt is precious, and where one sits relative to the salt, above or below the salt, traditionally marks one's status among the guests. A pair of servants bring in the trestles bearing the food. The first dish is a great iron cauldron of stew that has been simmering all morning. Chunks of venison from yesterday's hunt swim with carrots, parsnips, and onions in a fragrant gravy flavored with bay leaves and thyme. They place it on the sideboard near the high table, where the server in charge of carving and serving the Lord will ladle out portions to the noble family and important guests. Another team carries in trenchers of bread, round loaves of coarse brown bread, each sliced horizontally to form a kind of edible plate. These trenchers will soak up juices, and by the end of the meal, often be given to the poor or to the dogs as they become saturated and unappetizing to the nobility. There are also some finer white bread loaves, manchette bread reserved for the high table, treats made from sifted flour. Following them is a platter with a pair of roasted fowl, chickens or perhaps wild ducks, their skin glazed and crispy, emitting a mouth-watering smell of garlic and herbs. A bowl of butter, freshly churned this morning, and a pot of mustard accompany these meats. One of the pages runs to fetch the lord and lady, announcing softly that dinner is served. The noble family and any high-ranking guests or knights gather and make their way to the hall. The lord leads the way to his high table, offering his arm to the lady. Behind them follow their children, if they are of age to join the table, and honored guests like the castle's priest and the captain of the guard. Everyone else, the lower-ranked knights, the squires, the servants who will eat, find their places at the other tables. Before anyone starts eating, a small ritual of hand-washing takes place. A servant comes to the high table with a ewer of rose-scented water and a basin, along with a fine towel draped over his arm. The lord and lady each take turns holding their hands over the basin as the servant pours the water, cleansing away any dust before the meal. They dry their hands on the towel. Similar hand-washing is offered to the others at the high table. At the lower tables, people wipe their hands on cloths or rinse in bowls set out for them with plain water. Clean hands are important, since eating will largely be done with fingers. Now grace is said. The chaplain stands at his place and offers a Latin benediction, thanking God for the food. Everyone bows their heads. A murmur of amen goes around. With that, benches slide and creak as all settle in to eat. The hall comes alive with clatter and chatter. The lord and lady are served first. The carver, usually an experienced squire or officer, presents them with choice portions, the tender slices of venison, the meatiest parts of the roast birds. He uses a sharp knife and occasionally a two-pronged carving fork, an implement just coming into use for serving meat, to deftly portion out the food onto their plates. The lady's maid, standing behind her chair, makes sure her goblet is filled with watered wine and that a napkin is at hand. At the lower tables, the stew is ladled into bowls and passed along. People share trenchers, typically 2 people per trencher. They use their eating knives to cut pieces of meat or vegetables, spearing them or simply picking them up with fingers, then popping them into their mouths. They sop up broth with bits of bread. As the initial hunger is sated, a pleasant din of conversation rises. In the high table, the lord discusses with a visiting knight some news from the neighboring shire, perhaps a tournament to be held at Michaelmas, or how the crops are faring this year after an unusually wet spring. The lady listens, interjecting politely at intervals, all while encouraging her youngest child to eat a bit more bread. At the nearest lower table, 2 of the older knights reminisce about a battle they fought in their youth, their voices kept low out of respect, but their animated gestures betraying pride in their past deeds. A group of squires nearby listen in awe between bites of stew. Servants in the far corner trade jokes quietly, careful not to laugh too loud. An occasional chuckle or exclamation punctuates the overall hum. From the minstrel's gallery, music begins to float down, giving the gathering a light background melody. A troubadour staying at the castle has taken up his lute alongside one of the castle's own musicians, who plays a small harp. Together they pluck a soft tune, an old ballad that many recognize. It creates an elegant atmosphere without dominating the noise. Some of the diners tap feet in time under the table, or nod slightly to the rhythm as they chew. The hall is a tapestry of sensory experiences, the taste of savory gravy and hearty bread, the sound of music entwined with lively banter, the sight of bright daylight now flooding in through open doors and windows, illuminating the dust motes that dance above the feast. Closer to the floor, a pair of dogs wander hopefully, tails wagging. One settles under the high table near the Lord's son, who sneaks at a bone when he thinks no one is looking. Another prowls around the benches until a guard good-naturedly tosses it a scrap of gristle. These animals are as much part of the scene as the people, known by name to the household, tolerated because they help keep the floor clean of dropped food and perhaps catch the occasional rat. The meal proceeds through multiple removes courses. After the main stew and roasts, servants bring out a second course, simpler, perhaps some boiled cabbage and leeks from the garden, flavored with a bit of bacon and a platter of fried fish. If it's a day when meat is restricted by the church, fish might be the primary dish instead. The lord and lady are also offered a taste of a sharp cheese and some sliced apples to cleanse the palate. Finally, a small sweet may appear, a custard tart with dried fruit, or honeyed wafers to finish the meal on a pleasant note. Sweets are a luxury, but this is a comfortable castle, and the lady made sure something was prepared. Toward the end of the meal, cups are refilled for a final toast. The lord lifts his silver goblet and offers a few words of thanks. Perhaps he welcomes a new member of the household, or congratulates the soldiers on a recent successful patrol, or simply says, "Let us thank God for our health and this nourishment." Everyone drinks, those with ale in sturdy mugs, those with wine in finer cups. There's a communal sense of well-being in that moment, all gathered under one roof, protected by these walls, sharing in the same food and drink. With that, the dinner comes to an end. The chaplain says a brief grace after the meal, thanking the Lord for the blessings received. Benches scrape as people push back to stand. Immediately, the hall becomes a flurry of orderly activity as servants move to clear the tables. The trenchers, now soaked with juices, are collected. Some will go to feed the hounds, others might be set aside to distribute to the poor at the gate. Wooden bowls and knives are gathered into large baskets. Half-empty pitchers of ale are taken back to the kitchen, and remaining bits of food are quickly whisked away to be either saved for supper or thrown into the scraps bucket. One or two servants wipe down the tabletops with clean rags, and others sweep up crumbs from the rush-strewn floor. The efficiency of their cleanup reminds you that they do this after every meal, and they work fast before the food dries or the hall attracts insects. The lord and lady depart the hall with their immediate retinue. They have a bit of leisure now in the early afternoon. Often it was common to take a short rest, a brief nap, or simply a quiet digestive period after the day's big meal. The lord retires perhaps to his solar again, not for work this time, but to peruse a manuscript or scroll. He has a small collection of books, maybe a copy of the Psalms, a treatise on hunting, or some classical texts, and he enjoys using this peaceful time to read or have a clerk read aloud to him. The lady might withdraw to her chamber with her ladies, to sit by the window where the light is good and do some embroidery while conversing softly, or to simply close her eyes for a few minutes on a cushioned settle. The courtyards too grow a bit quieter just after midday. The workers have eaten and are taking a short respite. In the stables, a stable boy dozes on a pile of hay next to a dozing cat, both enjoying a shaft of sunlight that has found its way through the stable door. The blacksmith has paused, sitting just outside his forge, chewing on a bit of grass and contemplating the shape of a horseshoe he will resume hammering shortly. A couple of guards off-duty lounge on the steps of the gatehouse, helmets off, letting the mild sun warm their faces as they chat idly about whose turn it is to escort the steward to market next week. This brief lull is well earned in a life that is otherwise constant labor. Soon enough, the castle stirs again as the afternoon wears on. The lord, feeling invigorated after his rest, decides to spend the afternoon in a favored noble pursuit, hunting in the castle's nearby woods. The weather is fair, and the lure of the open land calls to him. He sends word to the master of the hunt to prepare. By mid-afternoon, in the outer courtyard, just beyond the inner ward, horses are being saddled and hounds leashed. The lord dons a shorter riding tunic and high boots, and wears a soft leather hat against the sun. He carries a light hunting spear and a bow, prepared for whatever game they might flush, be it a swift stag or even a crafty fox. A small party accompanies him, a couple of knights who relish the sport, his eldest son, a squire eager to prove himself on the hunt, the master huntsman with his horn, and several beaters and dog handlers. The lady of the castle, not averse to a hunt herself on occasion, chooses this time to remain and tend to things at home, though she stands at the gatehouse steps to wave them off. She watches with a slight smile as her husband and son mount their horses. The hounds strain at their leashes, eager, baying softly in anticipation. The drawbridge is lowered, and out they go in a clatter of hooves, the huntsman blowing a jaunty call on his horn that echoes back from the trees. The hunting party disappears into the green fringe of forest beyond a meadow, and the sounds of the horn and dogs grow distant. Life inside the castle continues in their absence. This is a chance for many who were occupied in the morning to attend to other tasks. Some of the men-at-arms, free from duty for a spell, engage in practice to keep their skills sharp. In a patch of open ground by the inner curtain wall, a makeshift training yard has been set up. Two young squires face each other with wooden swords and small shields. They dance back and forth, trading blows that land with a thunk of wood on wood. A knight stands by watching their form, occasionally calling out, "Shield up, Thomas," or "Good, now riposte," instructing them on technique. Nearby, another squire practices mounted drills. He sits atop a horse at a walking pace, holding a lance. Ahead of him is the quintain, a rotating arm with a target on one end and a sandbag on the other. He spurs the horse and tilts with the lance, striking the target squarely. The quintain spins, and the sandbag at the opposite end swings around to smack the squire on the back before he can clear it. A few onlookers chuckle good-naturedly as he almost loses his seat. He laughs it off and circles around to try again, determined to lean lower and ride faster this time so the sandbag won't catch him. In another corner, archers have set up straw targets. Some off-duty guards and a couple of older squires are shooting arrows. The bows creak as they are drawn, arrows released with a twang, and distant thuds announce hits on the targets. One lad retrieves arrows after each round, trotting back and forth. Among the archers is the castle fletcher, an expert in arrows, who not only makes them but knows well how to use them. He gives pointers on aim to a guard who usually fights with a sword, helping him broaden his skills. These training exercises are not loud or chaotic. They're measured, routine, with occasional bursts of exertion followed by feedback and adjustment. The castle's residents understand that skill at arms could one day save their lives, so they hone it diligently, if without fanfare. The lady of the castle, after seeing the hunt off, decides to pay a visit to tenants in the village just outside the walls. Accompanied by a maid and a man-at-arms for security, she exits through the gate to call on a sick woman she heard about from the chaplain. This is one of her compassionate duties, tending to the ill and poor under her lord's protection. She carries a basket with a small jar of balm and some soft linen cloths she had the castle seamstress prepare, as well as a loaf of fine bread saved from dinner. As she leaves, she passes the outer barbican, where some peasants wait to present minor grievances or requests to the steward in the lord's absence. She nods kindly to them, and they bow or curtsy deeply in respect, hearts warmed by her acknowledgment. The castle thus temporarily lends its grace outside its own walls, through the person of its lady. Inside, the steward holds a brief audience in the great hall to handle those villagers' issues. With the lord away, minor problems can be addressed by the steward, who has authority for day-to-day matters. A miller complains that one of the millstones at the watermill is cracked, and he needs the lord's help to get a new one. The steward promises to relay the message and see if the barony's quarry can supply one before harvest time. A farmer's cow wandered into a knight's garden, causing damage, and he fears punishment. The steward mediates, saying the farmer should provide a few days' labor to the knight as compensation, and the matter will be settled, a merciful outcome that all accept. This informal court is much humbler than the lord's formal sessions, but it is vital to keep harmony in the community. The villagers leave relieved, and the steward notes everything down to brief the lord later. Within the castle kitchens, the afternoon is a time to tidy up and begin preparations for the next meal, supper, as well as preserving any leftovers. The kitchen staff have boiled the remaining bones from dinner to make a stock, and now that stock is used as the base for a simple evening pottage. In a corner, two scullions sit grinding grain, not wheat this time, but barley and oats, to thicken the soup and make tomorrow's porridge. Another is carefully skimming cream from the morning's milk to churn a bit of butter. Leftover meat from the roast has been set aside. Some will be chopped fine with herbs to fill small pastries tomorrow, and some salted down to keep. The cook takes inventory of the pantry to plan supper. She sees there are still carrots and cabbage aplenty, so a vegetable stew with a little salted fish might do. A kitchen boy is sent to the storeroom to fetch a slab of salted cod, which has been hanging there. It will be soaked to remove the salt before cooking. The orderly cycle of usage and replenishment continues. By late afternoon, the sunlight turns honey gold and angles in through the west-facing parts of the castle. Children who live in the castle, whether the noble's own or the pages and squires, often have a bit of free time now. In one corner of the courtyard, you can see a small group of them at play. Two younger children, perhaps the lord's little daughter and the son of the castle's constable, are playing a clapping game and giggling. A couple of older boys have improvised a form of lawn bowling, rolling a leather ball to knock down some pins carved of wood. They laugh and argue good-naturedly over whose throw was best, until one of their tutors, the chaplain's clerk, comes to fetch them back to their studies, a short lesson in Latin or arithmetic before the evening. The boys groan but obey, trailing inside behind the earnest young clerk. Even in play or study, the castle's youth are being groomed for the future roles they'll take on, learning cooperation, competition, and the knowledge required of their station. As the sun descends toward the tree line, the hunting party returns. The castle folk hear the horn's triumphant blare from beyond the walls, and no game has been taken. The drawbridge is lowered, and across it come the riders, tired but lively with talk of the chase. On a sled behind one horse is the carcass of a large stag, its antlers proudly displayed. It was a successful hunt. This stag will provide a bounty of venison to salt and smoke for the upcoming weeks, and a fine trophy for the great hall. The lord and his knights dismount, handing their reins to the stable boys who run up. The hunters are splashed with mud, the lord's boots are caked in it, and one knight has a smear of dirt across his face, but all are smiling wide. They recount highlights to those who gather around, how the dogs cornered the stag by the stream, how the lord's arrow struck true, how one hound nearly got gored but leapt aside in time. The lady has by now returned from her own outing and stands by, listening with an indulgent smile as her husband animatedly measures out the antler's span with his hands. She congratulates her son on his first kill of the day. He managed to shoot a hare and is beaming with pride, hair tousled and cheeks flushed from the outdoor excitement. The huntsmen haul the game off to the kitchen yard for butchering. The stag will be expertly dressed, its hide removed for curing, later to be made into leather, choice cuts taken for immediate cooking or drying, and large portions salted down in barrels. A couple of the innards might be given as a reward to the hounds, who performed excellently. The courtyard smells now of sweat, leather, and the wild scent of the forest clinging to the hunters, crushed ferns, damp earth. It's a change from the domestic sense of bread and wood smoke. The day begins to draw to a close. The steward approaches the lord to give a brief account of what transpired while he was away, the issues raised by villagers and how they were handled, the progress of the repairs and tasks, and any incidents, thankfully none major. The lord listens as he walks slowly toward the keep to refresh himself. He nods at the steward's decisions, perhaps adding, "Yes, let's be sure the miller gets that stone. We can't have the mill idle," and thanks him for managing things. They agree that the formal responses can wait until morning. Meanwhile, the constable checks in with the guards. As evening nears, there's a changing of the guard. Fresh men prepare to take up posts on the walls and at the gate through the night. They gather in the armory to don warm cloaks and pick up lanterns and perhaps a new supply of crossbow bolts or arrows to keep at the towers. The constable gives them words of encouragement. It's a clear night. Keep sharp and call out if you see anything amiss. As the sun sets, these night watchmen ascend to their high perches, greeting the dusk with practiced patience. Within the castle, preparations for the evening meal, supper, are underway. It will be a modest affair compared to dinner. In the kitchen, the cook has a cauldron of pottage bubbling, using up vegetables and some salted fish flakes. The aroma is simpler, more homely, a bit of leek, a bit of thyme, the hearty smell of boiling cabbage. She also slices up some of the remaining bread to toast by the fire, to be served as trenchers again, or simply alongside the soup. A few apples that have begun to spot are stewed with a bit of honey and spice to make a warm, comforting dessert mush for the lord's family, who like something sweet before bed. In the great hall, the tables remain set in their positions from earlier, though they have been wiped clean and reset with fresh bowls and cups. Fewer people will eat this evening. Some of the laborers take their supper in the kitchen or barracks, content with a chunk of bread and ale. Supper in the hall is mainly for the lord's family, the knights and those servants directly attending them. As twilight gently creeps in, servants light a few torches along the walls and place a couple of lamps on stands to keep the hall lit. The hearth in the center is stoked again. Though the day was mild, the night will bring a chill. One by one, people assemble for supper. The lord comes down, now in a comfortable evening robe, a heavy fur-lined mantle thrown over his simpler undergarments, as he has taken off the formal tunic and hose for the day. The lady, too, is wrapped in a velvety cloak of deep blue and carries a candle to light her way. They choose, on this night, to sit not at the high table, but at a smaller side table near the fire, a more intimate setting, reflecting the informality of the meal. A few key members of the household join them, or sit at nearby tables, the chaplain, the steward, and the captain of the guard, perhaps. The atmosphere is familial and relaxed. Aware that the day's weighty matters are done, they allow themselves lighter conversation. Supper is served in simple wooden bowls. The pottage is ladled out, a humble gruel with vegetables and bits of fish. Alongside it, the toasted bread provides a satisfying crunch. They also have some leftover cold meats from earlier, sliced thin, which the Lord nibbles on with a bit of sharp mustard. They drink ale mostly. Wine is usually reserved for celebrations or the main meal, and the day's exertions have given even the Lord a hearty thirst that ale quenches better. The children, if present, sip on watered ale, or a tisane, herbal infusion made by the infirmarian, maybe chamomile or mint from the garden to calm them for bedtime. A sense of calm and fatigue pervades the hall. Faces are lit golden by the fire and torchlight, and the sounds are subdued. A knight recounts something amusing his squire did during training, making the others chuckle quietly. The chaplain shares a gentle anecdote from a saint's life that seems relevant to something discussed, eliciting thoughtful nods. The Lord, cradling his cup of ale, gazes into the fire a moment, likely thankful for the peace of this day. No crises, a good hunt, his people content. The lady, seeing him lost in thought, places her hand lightly over his for a second, and he smiles at her, wordlessly conveying his gratitude for her companionship. After supper, there is usually a short period of recreation or reflection before everyone retires. Tonight, one of the ladies has a pleasing singing voice and has been asked to sing a lullaby-like song. So as the servants clear away the bowls and cups, this young woman stands by the hearth, where the light is best, and begins a soft melody. She sings of evening and safe harbors and the gentle blessings of rest, an old song her mother taught her. Her voice is sweet and clear, but quiet. Everyone in the hall falls respectfully silent to listen. The tune is soothing, almost like a prayer itself. The hall's acoustics let the sound carry just enough that even those at the far end can hear. The fire crackles in harmony, and a sleepy dog curled near the hearth thumps its tail at the familiar sound. If you find comfort in these quiet journeys through the past, feel free to like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Also, I'd love for you to share in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. It's always so interesting to see how far and wide these quiet moments reach. With the song ended, the Lord and Lady bid good night to those assembled. The chaplain gives a final blessing to all. May the Lord grant us a restful night and peace. One by one, people drift off to their quarters. The older knights pat the younger squires on the back and send them off to bed with a half-playful warning to say their prayers. The steward rolls up his account parchments and stifles a yawn as he heads to his little office to lock them away. The servants finish wiping the tables and make sure the fire in the hall is safely banked. They cover it so it smolders safely, ready to be revived in the morning without blazing uncontrolled at night. The castle, so lively at various points of the day, descends into a gentle quiet. In the Lord's bedchamber, embers glow in the hearth, casting a faint orange halo. The Lord sits on the bedside, and the lady brushes her hair by candlelight. They speak in low voices about tomorrow. The Lord mentions he might ride to inspect a distant manor. The lady says she will see to organizing the upcoming harvest feast for the villagers. Their voices are soon muffled by the heavy bed curtains as they draw them closed. In the small adjoining nursery, if the castle has young children, a nurse hums a final lullaby to a toddler who has already fallen asleep, curled under a wool blanket. Elsewhere in the castle, those not fortunate enough to have private rooms find their rest where they can. In the great hall, a few pallets have been laid out near the now dull hearth for some of the household servants and perhaps the odd guests staying over. They wrap themselves in cloaks and blankets. A guard off duty uses his rolled cloak as a pillow on a bench. A stable boy, not wanting to leave a sick horse unattended, nods off in the straw of the stable, the horse occasionally nudging him as if tucking him in. The men-at-arms who must be ready at a moment's notice sleep in the barracks by the gatehouse, a simple room where each has a bunk and pegs on the wall for their weapons. There, a single lantern hangs from a beam, turned low, casting just enough light that if one of them is roused, he can quickly find his sword and shield. They joke a bit as they remove boots and stretch out, but soon even the hardiest soldier's eyes grow heavy. Throughout the castle, only the watch remains fully awake. On the parapets, the night watchmen peer into a moonlit landscape. It's a clear night, full of stars. The forest beyond the fields is a dark line against the horizon. From time to time, an owl's hoot reaches their ears, or the distant bark of a fox. The men exchange quiet words at intervals, just to keep each other alert. One might point out a particularly bright star, or remark on how the wind has shifted south, perhaps bringing mild weather, but mostly they walk their beats in silence, listening. The castle beneath them is mostly dark now, save for a faint glow from the chapel window, where a sanctuary lamp always burns, and the dull red of the forge where the coals have been covered, but still emit a faint gleam. A guard pauses by the beacon brazier at the top of a tower, warming his hands by the small flame kept there, just in case a signal fire needs to be lit to call for help. As the night deepens, a profound peace settles. Inside the thick walls, the people of the castle sleep soundly, trusting the stones and their comrades to keep them safe. A baby whimpers in its sleep in the women's dormitory, but a nursemaid sleeping nearby instinctively pats it and hushes it, and it falls back into innocent slumber. The lord turns over in his great bed, perhaps dreaming of a hunt or a feast, his arm draped protectively over the lady who dreams beside him. In the chapel, the chaplain kneels one last time at his small altar, whispering compline prayers for the souls under his care, before he too retires to his tiny chamber behind the chaplaincy, where a hard cot awaits, but also the comfort of duty done. All around, the castle that was by day full of voices and work is now like a stone ship sailing through a sea of night, its inhabitants safe in their berths. The only movements are the flicker of the occasional torch and the slow pacing of the sentries on the wall. Overhead, the heavens wheel, constellations that medieval folk know well. The hunter, the bear, shining with indifferent eternal beauty on this man-made fortress. Time drifts. In these hours, one could almost imagine the castle is uninhabited, were it not for the curl of smoke from a chimney, or the snatch of a guard's humming to himself to stave off loneliness. These same stones have seen countless nights like this, and likely will see countless more. On some far-off future night, these walls might lie in ruins, the halls empty, the laughter and toil faded into dust. Indeed, as the world changes, cannons and new firearms will challenge the supremacy of such castles. By early 1400, the thunder of gunpowder will echo across battlefields, and stout walls will crack under cannonballs. Castles will adapt or fall. Some will transform into more lavish, but less fortified manor houses to suit more peaceful times, and others will be abandoned, left for ivy and owls. But that is all beyond the horizon for now. In this moment, the castle stands strong and vital, its purpose fulfilled today, as every day, to shelter a community and give them a space to live out their lives. Of course, castles themselves varied widely in scale and luxury. A minor knight's fortress might be a simple tower house with perhaps a dozen people, where the lord and servants all lived and slept in one keep, and daily fare was humble. On the other hand, a king's royal castle could sprawl across acres, with multiple courtyards and hundreds of residents, knights, ladies, officials, and artisans, almost a small city within walls, filled with pageantry and splendor. Yet, whether small or great, Each castle was fundamentally a community enclosed by stone. The trappings might differ, but the rhythms of work and rest, of protection and provision, were much the same. In every castle, people looked after each other's needs and depended on one another, bound by loyalty to their lord and the shared duty of keeping their fortress functioning and secure. As we reflect on the reality of castle life, we realize it was not the endless romantic adventure of storybooks, but neither was it unremitting drudgery. It was a tapestry of ordinary moments, small pleasures, and occasional hardships. They lived without many comforts we take for granted, no running water or easy warmth, and danger could be ever present beyond the walls. And yet within those walls they created a world, complete with its own routines and celebrations. A world where the lighting of the hearth in the morning meant safety and sustenance, where the ringing of the chapel bell structured time, where a successful hunt or a good harvest brought genuine joy, and a harsh winter or looming threat forged a community's solidarity. Archaeologists today might sift through the soil of such a castle and find simple things: a child's doll carved from bone, a buckle from a soldier's belt, shards of pottery from a cooking pot, or seeds of herbs from the garden trodden into the earth. Each of these is a token of a life that once was, lives that cooked and fought and laughed and prayed. They remind us that beyond kings and knights known to history, there were cooks and washers, grooms and pages, living day by day inside these stone walls. In this gentle journey, we have witnessed the life of a medieval castle, not as a stage for glory and war, but as a living home of work and rest. The lived reality differed from the romantic tales of chivalry in its simplicity and even hardship, but it also had a rhythm and warmth often forgotten in legends. The stone walls provided protection, yes, but also a sense of community. The silent halls at night were not lonely, for they were filled each day with the voices and footsteps of a devoted household. Now the hour is late. The castle lies under the quiet blanket of night, as still as a painting. Close your eyes once more and picture it, the courtyard empty, lit by moonlight, the banners on the ramparts hanging limp in the still air, the gentle sound of a horse shifting in its sleep in the stable, the distant murmur of a sleepy guard exchanging a final word with his fellow. All is secure. Stone walls and silent halls are at peace until dawn. Let us leave them there, in their well-earned slumber. In your imagination, you may linger a while among those ancient stones, feeling the peace that comes after a long day's honest work in a safe haven. Maybe you too feel a bit of that contented tiredness, that readiness for rest. The castle's story for today is done, and night embraces it softly. May your night be as calm and protected as those within the castle, and may you dream, perhaps, of gentle days in a simpler world. Good night.